From the late 2000s onward, encounters carried one message: no one would be left out. Inclusion became the hidden curriculum. Welcome to the channel, My UFO Encounters. All the stories are based on real events, my field experiences, travels, and late-night studies, observations, and conversations with these beings from other planets. I'm fulfilling their request to bring the knowledge gained from all these years of conversations to all humanity. To this end, I create stories with guidance and knowledge from them. Welcome to this universe. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're watching from and what you believe about extraterrestrial contact. The first hints of inclusion arrived quietly, without fanfare, between 2007 and 2009. Participants noticed that when children were present, the phenomena did not diminish. In fact, some of the clearest sequences happened on nights when the group was intergenerational. Elders who had practiced for years sat alongside teenagers, while younger children wandered in and out with blankets and questions. The lights appeared anyway, sometimes brighter, sometimes longer, as though signaling that the curriculum was not reserved for experts. Logs from this period show patterns of subtle acknowledgement. A hush arrived, insects stilled, a low hum pressed into bones, warmth spread across skin, and a metallic tang touched tongues. Then, as the group steadied, a point brightened low and was joined by two others, forming geometry. Parents who worried that their children might disrupt the night found that the opposite was true. The presence of the young seemed to harmonize the group. Attention softened, patience grew, and laughter diffused tension. Dreams reinforced this message. Families reported shared dreamscapes in which presences guided not just adults but children. A child might dream of being shown how to breathe slowly when brightness surged, while a parent dreamed of being reminded to trust the child's steadiness. Logs compared across households revealed uncanny overlaps, symbols pulsing in rhythm, lessons in posture, corrections in balance. It was as though the phenomenon was teaching the family as a single unit, not just isolated individuals. Auditors noted the same trend. When comparing anonymized logs, they found that groups with wider age ranges often reported more coherent timings and descriptions. Diversity of perspective seemed to strengthen accuracy, not weaken it. Newcomers noticed things veterans overlooked. Veterans steadied the adrenaline of newcomers. Together, the circle grew stronger. The ethic of anonymity supported inclusion. With no names, no rosters, and no titles, there was nothing to separate seasoned practitioners from first-timers. Everyone began with the same silence, the same breath, the same notebook. Authority came not from seniority but from capacity. The ability to stay calm, to write clearly, to care for others under pressure. In this way, the method itself dissolved hierarchy. By 2009, participants were beginning to suspect that inclusion was not a side effect, but part of the curriculum. The phenomenon seemed less interested in dazzling elites than in training communities. Lights appeared not only to veterans but to circles filled with families, neighbors, and strangers. The message was subtle but unmistakable. No one was excluded. The sky had room for everyone willing to breathe, watch, write, and care. Between 2010 and 2012, the theme of inclusion became clearer. Families began reporting sequences that seemed tailored to their presence. In one circle, a hush arrived just as a child finished writing a clumsy description of clouds. Moments later, 3 points brightened and locked into geometry for nearly 10 minutes, the longest sequence that group had ever recorded. In another, a teenager's casual observation of a faint light turned out to match logs from circles hundreds of miles away. What adults dismissed as imagination became data. Dreams continued to emphasize intergenerational training. Parents dreamed of presences guiding them to step aside, allowing children to stand in luminous spaces. Children dreamed of being taught patience beyond their years. Sometimes entire households awoke with fragments of the same lesson. Balance under sudden brightness, breath during surprise, gentleness when tension grew. The phenomenon seemed intent on teaching families as families, dissolving the notion that preparation was an individual project. Auditors noted that when families logged together, descriptions often converged more accurately. Children tended to record raw impressions. It felt warm, it was steady, while adults framed geometry and timing. When combined, the record was richer and more reliable. Inclusion was not charity. It was method. Guides adapted their training accordingly. They began encouraging families to attend, reassuring parents that the ethic of care would protect children from embarrassment or pressure. They modeled how to fold blankets for warmth, how to explain silence to restless kids, how to turn logging into a shared game rather than a burden. Slowly, circles became more intergenerational by design. And you? Have you ever discovered that children or newcomers notice details adults overlook? Share in the comments. Your story might show how inclusion deepens perception. Field errors also reinforce the lesson. In 2011, a group mistook a cluster of satellites for intention. It was a child who pointed out that the lights glided instead of holding still. The correction was added to the checklist and the group laughed at its own blindness. Humility grew naturally when the least experienced member saved the night from error. Communities outside the circles noticed the ripple. Families who practiced inclusion under the stars carried it into daily life. Parents listened to children more attentively. Children learned to describe feelings with the same clarity they used for clouds. Households grew calmer. Schools began adopting short silences at the start of the day. What began as fieldwork was shaping domestic culture. By 2012, inclusion had matured into an expectation. Circles no longer saw children as distractions or newcomers as liabilities. They saw them as essential to the method. The curriculum had shifted from the training of individuals to the training of communities. As the network spread through the mid-2010s, inclusion widened beyond families to embrace diversity in all forms. Groups began noticing that when participants of different ages, backgrounds, and temperaments gathered, phenomena often appeared with greater coherence. Logs compared across these mixed circles revealed tighter timings, cleaner geometries, and more consistent sensations. The lesson was unmistakable. Diversity strengthened steadiness. Dreams reflected this widening. Participants reported shared visions of standing in luminous halls where people of varied appearances held hands, each carrying a different note in a larger harmony. Presences corrected them gently, reminding them to breathe together, to release tension without words, to remain patient when silence stretched. People woke with the conviction that the curriculum was teaching not just individuals or families, but humanity itself as a collective instrument. Auditing practices adapted. Teams began looking for convergence across diverse logs, treating differences not as errors but as complementary perspectives. A veteran's geometric description paired with a newcomer's simple sensory note created a fuller picture. This reinforced the ethic that no perspective was too small. Inclusion became a methodological necessity, not a moral gesture. Guides, too, adjusted their role. They ensured that quieter voices were heard, that children's notes were read alongside adults, that newcomers were encouraged to log without fear of getting it wrong. Authority meant protecting the contributions of all, not just the confident. This ethic gradually seeped into communities. Meetings in workplaces and schools began opening with moments of silence, encouraging everyone to write before speaking. The circles had taught society that inclusion produced coherence. Quick pause. Do you believe that real strength comes from groups that combine differences instead of suppressing them? Comment below. Your reflection might inspire someone else. Field events reinforce the pattern. In 2014, a group that included elders, parents, and children logged a sequence of 3 lights forming and collapsing with uncanny precision. Across the continent, another diverse circle recorded the same structure at nearly the same time. The convergence suggested that inclusion was not only tolerated but required. Humanity was being trained not as isolated observers, but as communities capable of coherence. By the mid-2010s, inclusion was no longer an experiment. It was the foundation. Circles understood that the phenomenon was less interested in individuals proving themselves and more interested in humanity practicing together. By the late 2010s and into the 2020s, the ethic of inclusion had become inseparable from the culture. Circles that excluded newcomers or discouraged children found themselves stagnating. Those that embraced diversity flourished, logging coherent sequences and reporting dreams that reinforced the same lessons: patience, humility, and care. The phenomenon seemed to align itself with groups that aligned themselves with each other. Phenomena continued with their familiar preludes: the hush, the hum, the warmth, the tang. Lights brightened, geometries held, triangles collapsed, points dimmed. But participants noticed that the most coherent events often happened when the group was widest in its makeup. Elders, parents, children, neighbors, strangers. Inclusion itself had become a signal. Dreams of this era reinforced the legacy. Participants described being shown circles that spanned generations, languages and histories all breathing together in silence. Presences guided them to see that the training was not about creating elites but about cultivating humanity as a whole. No one was excluded. Every voice, every breath, every note mattered. Auditors summarized the decade with a phrase that echoed through the logs. Inclusion is coherence. Groups that practiced exclusion produced fragmentation. Groups that practiced inclusion produced harmony. The lesson was clear and repeated. The unknown valued humanity most when humanity valued itself. Communities outside the circles adopted the ethic with surprising speed. Schools built curricula around shared silence and writing before discussion. Workplaces adopted inclusive logging practices to capture multiple perspectives. Families carried the ethic into dinner tables and bedtime routines. The practice had spilled beyond the field into the bloodstream of society. Final reflection. What do you think is the greater lesson? Lights in the sky, or the realization that humanity is strongest when no one is left out? Share your answer in the comments. By the 2020s, the message was undeniable. Contact was not a prize for the few. It was a curriculum for the many. The phenomenon did not reward exclusivity. It rewarded inclusion. The legacy of the circles was not proof but participation. The lights had taught humanity that the only way forward was together. The story of inclusion was not about who got to see or who got to lead. It was about building a culture where everyone mattered, where every notebook was worth reading, where every breath steadied the whole. The unknown had not come to crown heroes. It had come to train communities. And those communities, wide and diverse, had become the living proof that no one was left behind. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and share it with those who are also fascinated by UFOs. And leave your thoughts in the comments. What do you think really happened?